expectations around what a career should look like. So there's been this growing shift in mindset around careers, and it's become less about making money and climbing the corporate ladder, and more about building momentum towards a mission that actually matters, making an impact, doing something you love. So very fortunate tonight to hear from 3 trailblazers. These guys are carving their own paths and creating legacies. So please give me a hand, help me give a hand to welcome Bernise, Michael, and Florence. So just quickly about them, Bernise, you started off in tax in Deloitte, and then of all places you went to HSBC to do marketing. Then she jumped to Uber in London to do marketing, and she's now at Canva, Aussie's tech startup unicorn valued at $1 billion with over 10 million users, as Senior International Growth Manager. And Michael in the middle there started off as a financial analyst at American Express, jumped to PwC, KPMG, and then went to Mad Paws. Then he went to Expert 360, helped scale a team of 10 to 50 people, raise a Series B. He's now head of operations at Startmate, Aussie's leading startup accelerator. You guys remember that name, Startmate. And Florence started off grad role as an analyst at Morgan Stanley. Then she went to PayPal to help scale the Air France and Australian team, and took a couple of years off to take care of 2 awesome kids, and is now leading financial planning analysis at SafetyCulture, another high-growth, homegrown tech startup. You guys, I want you to be as involved in the conversation as possible, so please go to slido.com with the code Creator Mode. You can submit the questions anonymously, or vote for your favorite questions for the panelists to answer, or if you're feeling ballsy, just shout out the question. We're all in the same room, so yeah. One more thing and I'll shut up, promise. We have a surprise for you tonight, which I'm super excited to announce, but we have to wait till the end of the panel. So I really look forward to that. All right, you guys, icebreaker question, just to get the ball rolling here. As a kid, what did you want to be when you grow up? Bernise, will go with you.
Okay, this is pretty easy. So I love karaoke, so I was obsessed with musical theater, so I definitely wanted to become, Alpha and in Wicked and be on stage, and my dreams were killed in university and high school when my parents told me I could only be a lawyer or a doctor, and those were my 2 options. But I still was able to pursue a little bit of musical theater in uni, and I think up till today I try to use a little theatrics in my presentations. Chip has seen some of my presentations at Canva, and she could attest to my theatrics on stage. So yeah, musical theater star was what I wanted to be.
Awesome. Michael?
What did I want to be? I just really wanted to be grown up. That's it.
That's my answer.
But apart from that, I think just a soccer player. Pretty simple.
Soccer player?
That's all I wanted to be.
Did you see something on TV and I want to be like that?
Well, Europeans are quite big on soccer, so I was just want to be right there.
Florence?
So I used to do rhythmic gymnastics and trapeze as a kid, so there was no doubt in my mind that I would work in a circus. Unfortunately, that didn't really align with my parents' wishes. So what I did is that I actually imitated their signature to apply for a circus program, so that maybe I would convince them that I could go there. That didn't work very well.
So Broadway star, soccer player, circus freak, you know, sort of. I don't know.
Artist.
You guys, that's actually quite insightful, because as a kid, your ambitions are kind of constrained to, what you're exposed to, who you know and stuff. And that depends on your environment, which actually still holds true for adults. So, leaping into the relevant questions, in corporate, when you're in the corporate environment, how did you break free from that network to gain exposure to other opportunities beyond that world? Michael?
Good question. For me, it was kind of surrounding myself with people with non-traditional jobs. So whatever, I always tried to go for the weird, and those people actually really excite me. And the other thing was actually just literally going to events like this, just actually hearing from other people, their stories, how they got into it, and that just was really, really interesting. The other thing is actually in corporates, I never could stay in my own team. I always wanted to reach out to all the other teams to understand what's happening over there. Problem is they're always so deep that it's really hard to understand what they do.
Florence?
For me, it was really reaching beyond my circle of like friends and acquaintances, because most of the people I knew were also in banking and consulting, and nobody really wanted to take risks. And so what I started to do is actually more like from a digital perspective. I started to have people on my Twitter feed that were, you know, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and people that I really was looking up to. And so if every morning you wake up and you've got your feed full of all these people that do what you want to do, then it becomes a little bit of a routine. So it's your kind of digital ecosystem that you build, and you start building a culture, a knowledge, and you actually feel quite close to that world. So that's how I went about it.
Yeah, for me, it's similar to Florence in that, like, I grew up in Australia. I went to Balcombe Hills High School, which is full of really smart people who all did law and commerce, and I followed that trend, did law and commerce, had a lot of friends that did law and commerce, all went to the Big Four, and I followed that trend. And the only way I was able to break out of that was when I took a working holiday visa to the UK in London, and where I was like exposed to all these other types of professions, and I realized that, you know, there's actually more job companies and job opportunities that are wider than commerce and law, and that's when I started realizing maybe I don't need to actually stay in this field, and there's actually a world of opportunities out there. So yeah.
That's a good point, because you had that trigger of being exposed all of a sudden, like thrown in the deep end to meet all these new people and stuff. So for the other two, what were the sort of triggers, I guess, at moments that you realize, like, shit, I don't like doing what I'm doing. I feel like there's a bigger world out there, and like, do you remember that? Like, might be a bit personal. I remember my moment, but what about you guys?
You start.
Yeah, I remember quite clearly when I was analyst at Morgan Stanley, so it was very intense. So I was working on a multi-billion-dollar deal, like an M&A deal. So I spent about 3 weeks sleeping an average of 3 hours a night, including weekends. And then, you know, doubt started to creep up in my head, and I was like building this amazing model to come up with a really beautiful valuation, accurate. And then the deal got signed at a cafe between the two CEOs, and they actually agreed upon the value just with the discussion. So, so I still I still liked what I did, and I think this role has a place, but that's when I thought, I really want to have an impact, and I really want this impact to be real and visible, and not just be a little bit in a machine.
So for me, it was actually in the shower. Like, it sounds really weird, but like, you have your deepest thoughts in the shower. You know, when you just like phase away and you don't think about like random things, and you're just really in your zone. And it was more like, not because I loved what I was doing, but more because I was thinking about everything else but work, or trying to. And for me, that feeling actually then, and what made me realize it is when I did join my first startup, and there was only like 3 of us actually working there, you suddenly had those really deep thoughts, and all of them were about work, but they were in a really good way. Like, you just really want to get in there and solve the problems. And there was like the massive contrast of like, do you think about it in the shower or not?
No, but honestly, I don't understand. Like, can you explain that? Like, no, seriously.
No, yeah, no, it's genuinely just like, are you excited about what you do? Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
So what were you thinking in the just like, what was your thought process? Because I'm so interested in this, because in every story it's like, oh, I was doing corporate and now I'm a startup. It's just like, well, what was that gap? Like,
No, totally. That's a great question. It's for me, because I studied business, and everybody went into investment banking and consulting. That's kind of where I went into American Express and then into PwC and KPMG, just to try it, because it was really exciting to me. I love working with lots of different people, and I started working with lots of different clients, and you've got those 3-month projects, you finish them, you go to the next one, and it's super exciting for me. But that was the exciting part. It wasn't actually what I was doing on a daily basis. That's what I mean. Hope that answers it.
And Florence, what about you? What about that gap? That whole sort of train of thought, like, now I'm going to go into a startup?
I think it came about when I actually felt like I had built a good set of skills, you know, as an investment banker and then a consultant, and I felt very confident that even if it didn't work out, that I would fall back on my feet and I could do something else. So I was really happily wanting to take that risk, because I felt that if that didn't work out, I could just go back to what I was doing before.
Yeah, so I can relate to what you said about
Thank you.
So I had to do 2 jobs, one from tax to marketing, and the trigger there was a point at my time in Deloitte Tax when there were more thoughts of me hating my job versus me liking my job, and when those kinds of thoughts take up the majority of your pie chart of positive thoughts, that's when you start thinking, I should probably think about applying for other jobs and things like that. And it's scary to think of it as a jump, but really it's just the start of a slow process to transition. And so that involves coming to these events, starting to just update your resume, send it to a few companies. So that was one trigger. And then for moving into startup, it was again, because I was in London and I had already 5 years experience in the corporate world, I thought, well, why don't I just risk it and try joining this random ride-sharing company, Uber. Sure, I've never heard of them in Australia, but they seem to be big in London, and if it doesn't work out, I can just move back to Australia, no problem. So it was this whole thing about, like, I might as well take a risk because I'm in London, and when else in my life am I going to do this? So, yeah.
Uber wasn't a big thing, like,
It was not.
how did you even get, and how did you hear of it, and
Yeah. So 4 years ago, I remember moving to London and had never tried an Uber in Sydney. Didn't even know what it was. And then London, I took a black cab and paid £70 to get home after one late Friday night. And I was like, what did I pay for? And then a friend recommended Uber to me, and then I got hooked. And I loved the product. And there was a bit of news starting in the media, started covering this startup, and that's when I started to think, yeah, this would be a great company to join. I would have never considered applying, though, unless I didn't have a contact in there who actually said, yeah, we need people, like, we're dying, we need, like, people, we just need anyone. And so that's how I, thought maybe I could join a startup. I worked in corporate, but this guy's telling me that I can, so why not?
So, Michael, how about you? How did you even hear of menopause?
Good question.
Every question is a good
It's
question.
all great questions. I just it makes me rethink how I made my decisions. Who has heard of Mad Pause? Okay, cool. Like a couple of people in the room. Yeah. So I actually didn't know anything about Mad Pause. I moved to Australia. I was on a work and travel visa, and I just genuinely we had this alumni network at our master's degree with 8,000 people on it, and I was like, hey guys, I'm moving to Australia, I need a job. Anybody, give me something. And I got introduced by 6 different people to the founder of Mad Pause. And for me, similar, I was in a different country, it was just like, yeah, screw it, why not? Try something different. And that's why I ended up there. So there's 2-3 of us. I am not overly excited about pets or dogs or cats, but it was actually really, really good fun.
Did you say that in your interview?
No.
Oh man, I love cats. I've got like 10.
Need a job.
Right, so I love that whole user experience, doing the research. PayPal, that was a thing? When you heard of it, you were a user already?
No, it was actually not in France. So, the banks were really dominating the financial services system, even online. So, PayPal was actually really small. There were just 5 people. So, I was literally employee number 6 at PayPal France. And so that was kind of a risk. So PayPal was part of eBay, and even the eBay folks were looking at us like, what are you guys doing? We were like the little thing in there. And then progressively we grew up to actually be bigger than eBay. And so that's where, all my friends were like, are you sure you really want to do that? And that's actually what attracted me in it, like the risk in it, and also the fact that I was really part of molding, if you will, that company and help scale up and do the financial planning the way I wanted it to and have that impact was really wonderful.
I like the part where you said your friends are like, do you really want to do that? And for me that was super hard because when you're in a corporate, you have that sort of prestige, like I work at XYZ, so everyone recognizes that name, and your friends have a lot of influence over you sometimes, and your family and stuff. What strategies did you employ to kind of logically think through the decisions that you were making to make sure that that was good for you and not for them?
Yes, well, it was part of eBay, so there was still that recognition, but I think on this one, I only trusted my guts, like just myself, and I thought I'm just gonna own to it and we'll see what happens, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. So it was like really a personal leap of faith.
And so for me, I did like a pro-con list, and I stalked everyone on LinkedIn and things like that. What were your strategies that you can give people to take away with if they wanted to actually, pursue that path?
So I do a lot of journaling. I know that might sound a bit like yoga meditation, but it really did help where I would just write out my thoughts and reflect back on what I was feeling 6 months ago and be able to compare, am I feeling worse now compared to before, and what are my options moving forward? I still look back at some of my diary pages and look at the careers and the companies I considered, and it's good to just reflect on how far you've come from. But yeah, I also had the issue of being surrounded by all these friends and family in the same industry, in the same job, and I had parents that just wanted me to be a lawyer. So being in London really helped to just disconnect from all of that, to start afresh and be reborn. But we shouldn't have to move countries to make this kind of mental change. If you can just find a way to, like what you were saying, reach out to other people who are outside of your circles, this is the kind of, the little conversations will start influencing you and changing the way you think. I don't think it's ever going to be an epiphany. You'll wake up one day and you're like, today I'm going to quit my job. Sometimes it will, but other times it's like slow influence of friends and books you've read and diary writing. Yeah.
Bernise, is your family proud of you now?
Now they are, but it took them a while. I think for the first two years I was at Uber, they just thought I was just working for some taxi company. Why did they didn't, because they've never used Uber. They started using Uber maybe 2 years ago. Then my dad tried driving for Uber, which was great. And, they actually started being fans. So now they trust me. But it took years. It took years. I'd say 3-4 years ago, they still wanted me to be a lawyer. And, I was already 5 years, 6 years into working in marketing. So sometimes sometimes it's a slow process with them. Your parents' approval should never be a criteria for your career choice. They'll come around. It might take 10 years.
I have 5 PhDs right now because seriously, that was a path.
My parents still don't know what I do. I don't think they knew it for the last couple of years. But for me, what helped me to change jobs was, I guess, 2 things. One was everybody who knew the founder or the new company I was going to work for, I tried to get in contact with anybody who knew them and actually it's like a reference checking for me actually. So is that a good person? Do I want to work with them? And it's not even if they're necessarily convinced about business. For me, it was very much is this going to be it's going to be awesome. And just getting to know the people you're going to work with is so important. And the second thing was for me, and I did it for both startups, it was very much what's the worst thing that can happen? At the end of the day, you're going to try it out, you're going to do it for a couple of months, in 6 months or whatever, and it's going to fail. So, okay, cool, you had an awesome experience, you did something, you learned so much because it's there's so much to do. And you can get your fingers dirty in everything, it's amazing. And the last thing for me, I was fairly unconventional. When I joined Expert 360, it was only 10 people at the time, but I think they had 10 interns as well, so it was overall 20 people. And when I got the offer, I was before the offer, I was I want to meet every person in this team. And I want to make sure that I love everybody I'm going to be working with. So then they organized drinks and we all chatted and I signed the contract. In hindsight, I realized I only talked to all the interns who left a month later. That was what I did.
And if I can support your point about meeting the people you're going to work with, so this year when I knew I wanted to go back to a startup and work in tech, I hadn't heard about SafetyCulture, and then through a recruiting agent I saw this job ad, and the more I read about it, the more exciting it was. And then I went into the interviews and I met the CFO there, and I was just so impressed. This guy was so smart, and I think, well, if this guy works for them, obviously, it must be a really great startup. That was a good convincing point for me as well to join, just meeting the people there. And then once you do that, then you start, building your own ecosystem, and you pull a thread and everything comes with it. And the irony is that since I've been at SafetyCulture, I've realized there's so many links, like people that I know from my own network just through coincidence, because a lot of people come from corporate as well. And you just realize that actually it's got links everywhere in every corporate. And we have people coming through the door for interviews who come from the Big Four, and I'm talking C-level people who actually come through the door, and it feels really special that such, at the moment we're still small, but people really see the value of it.
So you, Florence especially, work very closely with the CEO, and you guys do too. So that's such a unique experience being in that position. What did you sort of learn from them in terms of any good habits, any the way they work and stuff that you admire about them?
Yeah, so I think real founders, they're a different breed of people. They have a drive that is really kind of out of this world drive. And Luke, the CEO of SafetyCulture, he never sits still. So he basically, even if, when the company works really well and has a good business model, he's never fully satisfied, and he's always looking for the next step. And that's very inspiring. And I think that's what it takes to really, keep the company innovating and growing.
I've seen hundreds of founders, CEOs operating and accelerated. What about the sort of the younger founders that haven't built that whole company of hundreds of people yet? Like, what were some of the skills or some of the habits that you found admirable of them?
So as part of Startmate, we see so many applications every single cohort, and we just had our latest Melbourne cohort with 13 teams, 29 founders, and the one thing which I love about all of those founders is actually their hustle. It's amazing. Like, whatever they put their minds to, they're just gonna go out there and try it. At least try it and then go for it. And often you even tell them, like, you shouldn't be trying any longer. They just keep hustling. They just keep trying to do it. And that's actually the one skill, like, in every amazing founder which I've seen, that's the one that they always have.
And before I joined a startup, I sort of saw that world and sort of like this, like Silicon Valley. Oh my God, like you're an outsider, you don't really know what's going on inside. Can I ask a controversial question of what's the ugly side of startup? The stuff that you see and try to hide under the carpet?
Yeah, well, I've got a very different perspective just because I work for way smaller startups than you have. And for me, the interesting thing was when once you join, you realize nobody knows what they're doing. And then everybody's just trying to figure it out as they go. And you just hire rather than for skill and people knowing what they're doing, you actually hire for like the hustle and like just getting things done and learning them. And that's such a huge drive, which actually is what I love. And you just always get thrown into the deep end and you just figure it out. And you realize everybody is doing it. So that was the big one for me.
That's so true. I had no idea what I was doing when I was like, I don't have a developer background, but here I am coding some stuff. So yeah, I love it.
Okay, something ugly. So being a cool startup, we have a sound system where everybody can play their tunes. So sometimes you have to listen to Justin Bieber. So it's good to have a good pair of headset.
I'm going to ask you for one more.
Yeah, but probably the disorganized, sometimes a chaotic state of things, because you've also got very big personalities, because everybody, like the hiring process is like, we really want big personality people who are bold. So sometimes, an addition of very bold people in the room gets a little bit chaotic, so it's really going through that chaos and accepting a certain level of disorganization.
So some people's pro might be someone else's con, and the cons that you've just mentioned now, can you switch it to who would benefit from that type of environment?
Ooh, I would say anyone could benefit from this. I don't know how to narrow it to a certain segment, but okay, actually I can, because there are some people that love corporate life and just want to continue in the same job for 5 years, 10 years, and if that's you, that's okay. But if you are the type that is driven in life by like change and by big challenges and by like just expanding your skills and meeting new people, then probably startups is the kind of place for you. if you thrive in chaos and disorganization and being able to figure out problems on the fly, that's you. But if you love the startup life, the corporate life, then there's plenty of those kinds of opportunities out there for you as well. So
And for me, like the flip side of nobody knows what they're doing is, and that's actually why I love working in startups is because you can make such a massive impact because nobody's done it before, nobody has exactly done what you're doing right now before, nobody knows it better. So everything you do actually has a massive impact. It's like anything you roll out, anything that you touch like has impact on the actual customer. And that's what I love. So nobody knows what they're doing, but you can learn anything and you can make it better.
Do you remember what Cliff said about at that strategy day about being a barrel?
Oh yeah. So Cliff, hustle, speed. He used this analogy of everyone should be barrels at work. And by that he was talking about comparing people to cannons. So you need to find the people who can really launch things and execute things quickly. And when you find those leaders, give them ammunition, give them teams, give them resources so that they could 10x whatever their output is. So if you think you're a barrel, that's the kind of person that Cliff is looking for to join Canva, and I'm sure it's the kind of person that any startup would need, people that can execute and launch things from strategy, from idea to execution, but also 10x that when they're given the resources as well.
Yeah, so to Michael's point about no one knowing what to do, it means that you don't have a defined role, which means you can take on more roles until you're a barrel that's super full. So as an analyst at Blackbird, this is not my day job, but I love the community aspect of it and just being able to give that freedom to actually run an event and talk to people and things like that. Just giving that freedom, I definitely didn't find sort of in most corporates, some corporates do, and the corporate that I was at was similar to Blackbird, but just having that sort of constraints of other people's expectations, I just found super uncomfortable. But just completely agree, the pro with the whole there's no role is you make it whatever you want to make it.
Yeah, something, but I still want to balance a little bit. It's true that, it is chaotic sometimes, there's a lot of big egos, but on the flip side, there's also a lot of people who have a corporate background, and you don't need to have a larger than life personality to work in a startup. And if you actually bring some skills of, being organized, having some processes, people are a little bit hungry for that as well, and there is really a place for these people as well.
You guys remember that you can shout out questions or anything. We've got some questions on Slido, but this isn't feeling like a conversation right now. I feel like it's very much do and stuff. So converse between you guys, converse with them. Yeah, go.
I've been in corporate for about almost 2 years now, but it seems like you guys were in corporate for a bit longer than that before you decided to make the jump into something startup related. I guess my question would be, do you feel how much of those skills that you learned in corporate do you feel you leverage in your startup? And if you're advising someone who is younger and curious about startups, at what point do you recommend that they start to move? Is there a point that's too early, or is there a point that's too late?
It's a really good question, and for me it's been really important to build up these skills to start with, and I would actually not recommend for someone to jump in straight away into the startup world. I think it's really worth building your skills. For me, for example, I built really my Excel and financial skills, and then I was a consultant. So I had a lot of training before I joined in, and I'm 100% leveraging everything that I've learned now. So I think it's good. For me, I worked about 5 years before I made the jump to PayPal, and to be able to really have my own impact. I would say 5 years is good, but then everybody is different, and if for some people it's relevant to go earlier, it is your own journey.
Yeah, I 100% resonate all of what you've said. For me, and it's quite funny because we're actually quite similar in a way. We just geeked about Excel for half an hour before this. But coming from American Express, that's actually where I learned my basics of financial modeling in Excel, and that really set me up really well. So I was at American Express only for a year, and then KPMG and PwC for about a year and a half. And that set me up so well for the startup world because I felt really confident in my Excel and financial skills. So actually the next job I took, I was like, at least I know something. Like if they're gonna hire me, at least they're gonna hire me for something. And that jumped into startups, that skill, just like being analytical, having that modeling skills, that really, really helped me. The other one is, as a consultant, just like putting slide decks together really, really fast. That's a great skill to have as well. Not necessarily pretty and really long with lots of words, but just like getting them out there. And next thing.
Yeah, I also agree, like 2 to 3 years is a great time to start thinking about jumping into startup. I look at people in Uber and Canva whose first job is at Canva Uber, and I think, boy, this is going to be a hard one to top. If if this is what you think all jobs are like, it's really hard to beat that. And what's great about the corporate world is that it does train you to communicate well, to be structured, to work with other people, to work in teams. Well, if you're coming out of uni, you might come into this chaotic world of startups and just think that's the norm. But especially with Canva, I think we're like a startup in the puberty stage now, and I went through that stage with Uber as well. And they're really starting to value people with corporate skills, like setting processes in place and getting organized and communicating. That stuff matters. And when you're scaling from 0 to 100, it's a very different skill set from scaling from 100 to 1 billion. And there are parts of the business that need 100 to 1 billion, and parts of the business that will need the 0 to 100. So it's all a mix. So yeah, 3 years, 2 to 3 years, great. Yeah.
I completely disagree with that. My colleague Mason, where are you? I want to ask you, because he graduated and went straight to a startup, and I think he's doing a bloody fantastic job, so what do you have to say, Mason?
On the spot, but I actually found that I knew exactly what I wanted to do. So I found jumping the startup world to be, from a skill point of view, that I could just learn whatever I wanted to learn at sort of the highest velocity. It was intense, it was action packed. At the same time, like, I think it's kind of put me in a good position to have as many skills that I wanted.
Is that because you got good mentors, like a few people that actually taught you some skills?
No. I honestly found reading and learning, just general curiosity, to be the biggest advantage from that standpoint.
So that's also one of the big differences between corporates and startups, which I found. Is in a corporate you always have somebody who's high up, who actually knows it better, who's done it for a long time, and you can learn from them really easily. In the startups, you often don't have that. You actually do need to forge your path ahead, and you don't have anybody to learn from. You actually either look into the other startups and other companies and you learn from them, or you actually just literally read up on Google and teach yourself. Not always, but often.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with that. Like, it's really great that you've jumped in straight away. And if you are coming straight from uni into a startup, you need to find other sources of truth that are not necessarily within your company. Actually, I think the Australian startup scene is very much in its infancy stages, and there is a danger that because we're so far from the rest of the world, that the startup scene here just stays, talking to other people in the Australian startup scene, which is really a tiny, tiny percentage of what is happening in London, in San Francisco. These are places that are like years ahead of Sydney. So it's really important to find other people outside of, not only if you're in a startup here, to find people not only here to be mentored for, but also overseas, really broaden your perspective. Otherwise, you may end up just thinking that just the benchmark, the best practice is here in your company or in Australia. It's a big world. Yeah.
What do you define as a startup? Because a lot of the companies you're talking about all have tens of millions or even Canva, hundreds of millions of venture backing. What about joining a company that's got nothing?
So I can't talk to this because I joined Uber when it was probably puberty stage, and same with Canva. I feel like puberty stage, but I think you're more of a 0 to grew it from.
Yeah, no, I love that kind of stuff. But to be fair, it's a really hard one because I come from a business background, so I studied business and international management, and I actually don't have any hard skills. That's when I was said, like, I actually learned Excel and Google Sheets. I was like, that's at least like a confident skills that I have. And joining startups when they're really early on, you don't just found a startup. You need to love what you're gonna do. Like, you literally need to be so passionate that you're gonna do this for the next 15 years of your life. So you just, being a founder is a really, really special thing. And it's like, you really need to think, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? Joining a startup later on is like one of the early employees. For somebody from my background, that was really hard because every startup from like 0 to 10 always hires engineers and salespeople, because that's the people who make a difference. People like me don't make a difference. And so with Mad Pause, why did I join and how did it even work? And can I recommend it? Is because I kind of joined as a salesperson actually. It was very much customer support, and customer support is so important for any startup, like being close to customers. Could I recommend it? It's definitely a unique experience. I wouldn't never do it because it's just fun and it's fun to work for a startup. But actually, like, if you want to get exposure to a certain industry, to try something out. And with Expert 360, I joined when there was 10 people, and it was quite unusual to hire a business analyst at 10 people, because like I said, usually you hire engineers and salespeople. But for them, I joined because they knew they're gonna scale the marketing team and sales team so much, they needed a support person to basically support those two functions. And again, it's such an unconventional role that you don't even have it often in startups. Could I recommend it? I mean, I absolutely loved my experience, but again, it's such a rare case.
And what do you do?
I actually thought quite a bit about this. Can I just, sorry, I'm a colleague of Tips, I'm not just a random from the affiliate. So I career pivoted out of law into startups, and I actually sort of didn't intentionally, but I A/B tested at the time by joining 2 startups very similar at the same time. They were both like part-time gigs. One of them could afford to pay me and one couldn't, and 6 months later only one was still in business, so you can guess which one that one is. So I guess my learning was really early, as in sub $1 million in revenue is awesome because you're foundational, you're setting everything up, you get to learn and make heaps of mistakes and no one cares because they can't afford to be picky. And so that's really awesome, but you also have to be prepared for the fact that like in 6 months' time you may not have a job and you're out looking again. But you may not care because you're kind of like out there hawking your skills and no one is biting because you don't have any startup experience. So this can be a way to kind of bootstrap your CV to make you more attractive to startups. The other thing I would say is like startups at sort of 1 to 3 mil, or sort of Series A stage, so they've raised maybe up to 3 to 4 mil of venture potentially, or sort of have 1 to 3 mil in revenue. I think that is the perfect inflection point for corporates wanting to make the switch into startups because they're unlikely to fall over. If you can generate $1 million in revenue, like you're not nothing. You've solved a problem, people want to pay you for it. But you're also at this stage where the company is likely like taking off on a big trajectory. You will have lots of responsibilities. You'll be able to be like VP of something, like the head of a department. So if it's successful, if the company is successful, all the credit accrues to you. That is not true when you join a startup that is already a household name, already generating hundreds of millions of revenue. It's very hard to move the needle on a startup that is like already at its inflection point. So I think if you're early on the kind of career pivot trajectory, Series A is the sweet spot.
How do you find those startups?
Tech Press is like a good one. There's like Startup Daily, there's a whole bunch of newsletters. It's unlikely to make it into AFR, or they're getting better about covering tech startups, but usually like a seed round is not something that they're willing to cover. And really like whatever you're interested in, like if you're from, I don't know, in a property development fund, you at least have some industry knowledge, you probably have some skills that are useful to prop tech startups. Start kind of Googling, researching, finding people on Twitter, etc. who are in prop tech in Australia. There are accelerators focused on almost every vertical now, like just sort of do your research, because those startups are unlikely as well to be like advertising roles, but they definitely have needs. So if you can get in front of them and say, hey, I'm really interested in what you're doing, here's what I can offer, like that can sometimes start things.
Yeah, love it.
Determine a good one from a bad. Sorry, how do you determine a good one from a bad one? Just because
From a good startup from a bad one?
yeah.
I think Michael answered that really well, like just reference checking, check that they actually raise money, how much revenue they have, who their investors are, and reference check the employees.
Yeah. I just want to jump in because that's a really, really good point. Like I joined Expert360 exactly when they finished the Series A raise. So they just raised lots of money. That's exactly the point at which startups switch on the hiring funnel massively. So they actually start hiring lots of people because they need to scale massively. And that's exactly the point when I joined Expert360 as well.
And I think also if you're going to work in this kind of startup, then it's more of a lifestyle choice, because when the startup is at the very, very beginning, you just give it your all. So you work all the time and weekends, you with the founders until the next. So you've got to be ready to do that. And for me, if I wanted to do that, I would rather for it to be my startup and start up my own company, so that at least you get the benefits of that.
I'll add to that by saying that when I was moving back to Australia, I had to choose which startup I would join, and my criteria was not just revenue, but also looking at user growth and like looking at their scale internationally. So, places like Uber, people originally were like, "This place is losing money. Why would you join?" But I saw, the user growth was like hyper growth. They were growing so much overseas, and that for me was an indicator that they would continue to be successful. And that was the same in Canva, in that their hyper growth, their growth rates are Uber levels. That was one of the big reasons to why I joined. And the funding, because that made me think they can pay me.
Yeah.
That's good. I can just. You all worked at startups before, so Uber, Mapboards, PayPal. What made you decide to move to another startup after that? Did it come too corporate?
So mine's a unique case because I was working in Uber Singapore, which was the Asia Pacific headquarters, and it was at the time the highest priority region for Uber because it was the region that was losing the most money because we had a competitor there called Grab. So they brought me on October to try and fix the marketing efforts there, fix their offline marketing efforts. Unfortunately, we got a new CEO who decided that the strategy was financial sustainability and that we should exit the region, and our competitor Grab acquired us all. So actually I would have stayed on with Uber, but because we were acquired, I had to make a choice either to move to the competitor Grab or figure out a new career path. So I'm in startups because another startup acquired me and I didn't want to be with that startup and I had to make a choice. So it wasn't like I stopped liking Uber actually did at the time.
Yeah, my case was unique as well in a way. I was here initially on a work and travel visa, which only allows people to work for 6 months for a company, so it was pretty natural that I had to move on from Mapboards after 6 months. And then Expert360 initially, so they're a marketplace for freelance consultants, and because I used to do consulting, they initially wanted to hire me as a consultant. And at the interview, I was there for half an hour until I actually figured out half an hour later that they are actually hiring me for a full-time position. But my second move then from Expert360 to Startmate was quite different. So I was at Expert360 for 2.5 years, and I was just hired after the Series A. We went to a Series B where we raised 14 million with Airtree, and at that stage, the company grew from 10 to 60 people, and everything changes so much throughout that huge growth process. And things changed so quickly that I actually decided that I'm massively motivated by learning, and for me it was like, how can I, instead of working with one startup and learn from one startup, how can I work with 30? That's actually the reason I then quit and joined Startmate, because now we've got 2 cohorts a year, 30 founders around me every single day, which I love.
For me, PayPal 100% became very, very corporate. So at the time, they actually even said that we needed a more diverse, hiring policy, more diverse meaning non-MBAs, because everybody had an MBA and we were all thinking exactly in the same way. And also I found with scaling up, we didn't have an impact anymore. I felt that, nothing that we really had an impact, and the business model was so good that there was this joke going around that if we all went on holidays, the results would be the same. So for me, that's when I thought, it's become corporate.
Last question. guess last question for me is I was watching a really good documentary called The New Hustle. Thanks for the recommendation over ramen. It's about SafetyCulture, Canva, and Vinnie Mofo, and sort of their journey interviewing Luke and Mel and Cliff about building the startup. And one thing that Vinnie Mofo's founder said that really stuck with me was that he said, there is no work life, there's only life. And I completely love that because I can't imagine separating myself into two, something that I do for a living to make money versus something I absolutely love and enjoy and want to do every single day. How did your mindset change once you joined the startup in terms of the balance?
Yeah, so I decided pretty quickly in my career that I needed a job that I loved. So I was at Deloitte Tax only for 7 months, and then it's after that I joined marketing. And I did decide at that point that I love travel, and so that's why I went to London. So I basically pursued job opportunities based on the opportunity to travel. So I didn't actually try to climb the ladder and become like head of growth and marketing. I was seeking out the horizontal moves across countries. So I started in Australia, moved to Hong Kong, moved to London, moved to Mexico for 6 months, moved to Singapore, all because I wanted to travel. And then I reached Singapore and actually hated living in Singapore. No offense to anyone who's lived in Singapore. And after that I decided, actually it's not so fun anymore to be being an expat. What do I want to do now? And I imagined what my ideal lifestyle would be, and I came to the conclusion it would be coming back to Australia with the beach lifestyle, the sunny weather, and more chill environment, and finding a role in a tech startup here. What's hard about choosing this lifestyle is that honestly there are less tech startup opportunities here compared to places like Silicon Valley and London. But luckily, if you do have some experience and you are working hard to find the connections, you can make it happen. It is just a lot tougher. But I made the conscious choice to come back to Australia based on lifestyle versus my need to go to Google and San Francisco and Facebook, etc.
And how did my perspective on work and life change? When I joined startups, it's actually a really good segue back to it's the shower time. when you are in the shower and you think about what you love doing and you want to keep doing it, that's how my perspective changed. It's like I am super excited about what I do, about actually helping people and accelerating them right now at Startmate. And yeah.
Yes, and for me, like it's like honestly the most exciting job I've ever had, just because of that impact. Sitting next to the founder, basically, if the startup run out of cash, we can't operate anymore. So it is so real that you really get passionate about it. And I'm definitely, I used to really see my life as work and life. And now it's definitely more blended. And when I wake up in the morning, I'm genuinely excited to go, and that makes a huge difference.
Awesome, that's a wrap. Thank you so much, Bernise, Michael, and Florence. Thank you so much, Joel, Peter, Vinny, Toki, Brett, Alyssa, all you guys for helping out with this event. Thank you so much. I've been to so many events, and what I do afterwards is I just go back and resume in my daily life. I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to hit the resume button, okay? So there's 3 action items that I've put together so that you guys can actually do something about this conversation. The first one is to stick around and talk to someone with a different colored tag. You're blue, you're corporate, you're red, you're startup, talk to someone different. Right now, go to LinkedIn, join a group called Creator Mode. We're going to be posting this video, other events, other job ops, all that stuff up there. And the last one, the surprise. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Okay. So we have a surprise for you. You've heard the stories. Now it's your turn to make that leap. Please help me in welcoming Startmate CEO James Tynan.
Hello.
Do you want to pivot to that?
In a minute. We're just kind of getting the audio visual set up. Can I get an understanding? I just want to know who's in the room with me here. Where are my lawyers at? Anyone? Couple? Bankers? Bankers, great, yep. What about who's working just at like an ASX 200? Yeah. Where are the rest of you? Who didn't put their hand up? Throw out some
Accountant.
accountant, yeah, great, okay, some accountants. Anyone? Consulting, yes, where are my consultants at? Okay, so I'm a former McKinsey guy, so that I feel it. Anybody else? Like, what are some of the other jobs we have?
Customer service.
Customer service. Okay, cool. Great. Well, so now, can I get you've heard some amazing stories from our panelists. Hands up if you're feeling like a transition to a startup is something that you want to do at some point in your life. Yeah, okay, great. So what you've just heard are three and from Sam and a few others, some amazing stories of how people have made their own idiosyncratic journey into the world of startups. What I want to talk to you about is a pathway that we've just created at Startmate to help you all make that transition. So it's called the Startmate Fellowship. But before I get to it, as I said, I am a former McKinsey consultant, so I love to talk about things and think through things in threes. So maybe Brett can give me the next one. Here's how I think about it, right? So step one, you've got to balance your risks and rewards. 2, you've got to define your needs. And 3, you've got to evaluate your options. Okay, right, so evaluating your risks and rewards. You've heard some of the amazing rewards of working in a startup. I really put them in 2 buckets. One of them, and I didn't hear too much about this, but I came in a little bit late, but one of them is financial. And it's really important because I think in Australia, we don't realize that it's not just the founders of startups that do incredibly well out of their success. About 15% of a given startup is held in what's called an employee stock option plan. So if your company, like Canva or SafetyCulture, becomes a unicorn or a decacorn, that can be hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars that is distributed among the top employees. So where I've been living and working in the US for the past 6 years, I came back about this time last year. To me, it was completely normal to meet people who were incredibly wealthy who'd never founded a business. They were just very, very good operators. And what they would do was kind of do that with multiple companies. They didn't necessarily always join one startup, they joined startups. And so that is one of the big rewards. Another, which you've heard a lot more about today, is the level of responsibility that you can get. Just the ability to open new offices, launch new products. It is huge and it's very different from corporate. But the second thing you need to do is kind of define, well, what do you need in order to make that transition? And I think nights like tonight that Tip has put on are a really good example of one of the things you need. You need a really strong network to get visibility into all of the different companies. Oh, because I didn't mention the risks, right? When you're balancing, I was talking about the rewards. The risks, not all startups make it. In fact, most don't. So picking the right one and picking the right one at the right stage, really, really important. And not only that, it's not just that the startups can fail, it's that you can fail inside the startup, not through necessarily any fault of your own, but if you don't find that really idiosyncratic balance between you and the startup, if you don't find your power lane, the startup is kind of a young organism that can kind of reject the new organ very easily, especially at early stages. See, I'm getting some nodding, right? You've seen it happen.
I had to pivot very quickly in my role in Canva. I originally started in launching payments in different countries in Canva, and then eventually I had to find bigger opportunities, and now I lead a team of 10 in performance marketing, so within 4 months. So that's the kind of thing that you have to find a power lane. Yeah,
exactly. So, and that's a perfect example of where where you started wasn't necessarily where you needed to be. And some people, are able to pivot around and kind of find where they fit. But sometimes it just feels like, oh, this whole startup thing isn't for me. Whereas it may be, it's just that you didn't find that place where you could really unleash your talent. Because that's hard to do, because they're all really different from each other. It's not like when you work at one marketing agency and as a creative director you move to another marketing agency, it's all kind of the same, but the people are different. It's like really, really different between different companies. So really finding that power lane is a challenge. Okay, so risks, it is a risk. So what do you need? One, you need a network that gives you visibility, not just into all of the different opportunities that might be happening at startups, but you need visibility into, within those startups, where might I fit? Two, you need people who've done it before to be your mentors. People who are really great operators, really great founders, to kind of help you unleash your skills and work out that interface between you and the business. And then three, you need to have basically the kind of courage to go and to do it. And to not be necessarily burdened by a huge amount of debt or money that you need to pay in order to kind of learn the skills that you need in order to make that transition. So you've got a bunch of needs. If you look at your options today, they really come down to one, you leverage a personal network or leverage as many networks as you can, kind of ad hoc, do your research like we were hearing before, in order to find those opportunities and kind of jump into them. So kind of leverage personal networks would be option A. The problem with that is it doesn't help you most personal networks, frankly, don't have a lot of visibility into what's happening in Australian startups. You can come to things like this to get a little bit of a sense, but then it's really hard to find what's happening inside those startups and really where are you going to fit. So personal networks are great and they're important and everyone should leverage them, but they're limited. What often people do when they're transitioning between different industries is they do an MBA. And you can see in Australia we've got a bunch of MBAs and a bunch of Masters in Entrepreneurship programs where traditional educators are trying to get in the game of saying, we're going to prepare you to work in a startup. Now, there are a couple of problems with this. The first one is that if you talk to any of the founders of the organizations that are represented here or in the room, they'll tell you that that is an anti-signal. So for the growth stage startups that you're all interested in, the founders of those startups are not looking to say, hey, how can we get some more MBAs in here? Really what they're looking at MBAs and they're thinking, I don't know, we need people who can really learn on the job and roll up their sleeves. It's not that MBA is bad, it's just that it's not necessarily the best thing. In fact, Luke Anir from SafetyCulture is famous for saying an MBA, doing MBA in order to work in a growth stage startup is like training for a running race in a swimming pool. Like it's not bad, it's just not quite the right fit for what you need. And the reason is that because the things are moving so fast now that the skills that you need are being invented in the startups that these guys work for. So if you want to get those skills, you can't wait for them to get into a classroom. By the time they're in a classroom, it's too late. They've moved on to the next thing. So an MBA, can be great for transitioning between more traditional industries, not necessarily the right option for transitioning into startups. So that sounds kind of discouraging. Personal networks are limited, MBAs, maybe also not so great. So what do? Well, the good news is that we are launching literally today. We're opening up applications for this thing we're calling the Startmate Fellowship. And here's what it is. You can flick me across, Brett, to the next one. We literally just went live yesterday in the Fin review. I'm not sure if anyone saw it. We'll send it around after this. We'll see. This is the other thing. Learn by doing. We're kind of working out how to do this pitching to people like you.
Don't use Canva.
Yeah, that's right. Totally. Yeah, we should be on Canva. So the Startmate Fellowship is it's like an MBA, but it's and so yeah, we just went live in the financial review. We're working with Canva, SafetyCulture, Koala, and Propeller, 4 amazing teams. But if you flick to the next one, what we've built is a platform for talented people to find their power lane or their sweet spot in a rocket ship startup. And so how do you do that? Next one, please, Brett. It's a 6-month program. So whereas a lot of MBAs, Australian MBAs will take you a year and cost about $50,000, US MBAs will take you 2 years and cost you up to $200,000 US. What we've done is shortened it up to 6 months, and the reason we can do that because it's intensive an apprenticeship model. It's not about classroom learning and waiting for things to filter in. It's about learning side by side with the best teams and the best mentors in Australia to give you the skills you need and help you find that power lane. So how does it work? 1 month of intensive coaching with mentors, then 2 rotations at Canva, Koala, SafetyCulture, or Propeller, and then an immersive study trip to the US where the whole time we've been mentoring you and we've been working on how to do product management, how to do growth, and then we'll meet some of the best people in the world at those disciplines. So for example, we'll be looking a lot at growth and growth marketing, and then we'll be working with these guys on their growth, and then we'll head over to the US and we'll meet Andrew Chen, who basically built the growth engine for Uber. And we'll talk to him about what he did. So, and then it all culminates in you'll have a powerful network for life and a guaranteed job in a startup in Australia or the US. So this is so when I was at McKinsey looking for my transition into startups, this is what I wanted. And so I'm really thrilled to have been able to build it. We've been privileged to work with some incredible people. So if you can flick to the next one, Brett. We've got Canva, SafetyCulture, Propeller, and Koala. So can I get some hands up from anyone who's from those organizations? So we've got some group, Team Propeller over there, Team SafetyCulture here. SafetyCulture as well. There's someone from Canva? Yeah. Canva, yes, of course, Canva here. And Koala, I can talk to Koala. We've got some really great folks at Koala. In fact, Tim Doyle, who's been heading up the head of marketing, is a really strong force behind this. So we've got some incredible people we're working with. We're going to expand this over the next year. And really what we want is for you all to apply. So what you need to do is just go to startmate.com.au and go through the process. The applications are blinded, so it's not about your resumes, it's not about who you know or anything like that. It's just about answering problem questions and how interested you are and how you want to, how much you want to take advantage of this program. So that's what we're doing. I'm going to open it up to questions, but before I do, I just want to make sure that, can we get the hands up again from Canva and Propeller and SafetyCulture? So I want to just make sure you target these people to talk to kind of talk about whether or not working with them is something that you really want to do, because I think you're going to be impressed. Plus, of course, our amazing panelists. So that's enough from me. I'll open it up to any questions that folks have.
Okay, so you've gone through how you applied, but how do you judge the applications?
Well, great question. So one of the things we're happiest about is, has anyone heard of a company called Applied? So it's brand new. It's a Blackbird investment. They raised recently, so they're a startup just like all of these folks earlier in their journey. And what they've done is they've created an applications process, a way to hire people that reduces bias by an enormous amount, by kind of throwing out the resume and actually having it much more about people answering problem questions, and those problem questions being rated and evaluated by people who know what they're talking about. And when you do that, not only do you get better teams, you kind of get rid of a lot of the bias in the process. So that's the first stage, is this, you can just go onto startmate.com.au literally right now and start filling out an applied application. And then from there, we'll select the top 20 or 30 folks to come to an in-person session early next year. And it'll be kind of a day worth of activities and almost like a hackathon. And then the folks who are really keen and we're really keen on will start the program in March 2019. Any other questions? Actually, could we flip forward to the timeline slide? That's probably a good one.
I know you mentioned the MBA, right? I know you mentioned the MBA and everything. A lot of people, when they don't know what to do, they seek to education to go that route. I know at this University of Sydney, they have coupled with startups to make a program. Are you guys thinking possibly of coupling with universities to bridge that gap where you're getting education and also innovatively moving forward with what you're interested in? Because that's going on as a buzz thing right now.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. The way I think about this is that what we're building is almost like a startup itself. And one of the things that I definitely think we're open to that, and eventually that might be a good thing to do. But I think that it's kind of like Canva teaming up with Adobe early on, saying like everyone, people love Photoshop and they think Photoshop is excellent and that's really the standard. And Canva's kind of like this new thing, and it's doesn't quite do everything that Photoshop does. So maybe you should team up with Photoshop. And it's like actually, I think that that part of the kind of, we can be much more pure to what you guys need than a university
We're
can.
designing credit towards an MBA.
Yeah, but my thing is, I'm just not even sure that you guys need to spend that kind of money or that kind of time on an MBA to do the kinds of things that you're going to be doing in a growth stage startup. I'm not necessarily against teaming up at some point, but I really think that that it's not going to be the best use of your time. Essentially, everything that we've done is tailored to the people who really know what they're talking about being the people teaching you, which is not always the case in an MBA program. You get people whose knowledge is a little bit out of date. We've got the people who are actually doing it right now. And then also the time that you're spending, every single second you're spending is to be learning something, you know, and learning by doing, as opposed to kind of, you know, I used to work for a place, has anyone heard of Khan Academy? Khan Academy in the room? So it's the world's largest ed tech. That's what I was doing for the past few years. And my boss Sal used to say, why is it that, you know, degrees, why is it that every degree, like undergraduate degree, like lasts 3 years, which it kind of does in the US? Why, like, is that some weird coincidence that like English and engineering, they all like mastery of those subjects last 3 years? It's like, no, because it's like, it suits them. It's an arbitrary limit imposed by the education system to say, we want people to hang around for 3 years, so we're just going to fill this time up with the stuff you need to know. And I think that what we've looked at, rather than filling up time, is what is the minimum amount of time you guys need to really scale up your skills, and how can we kind of inject you to the maximum with what you need. So I guess I sound like I'm being negative on universities. I'm not. I want us to kind of build something, and then once it's great, you know, partner with them for sure.
Nothing's bad.
Nothing's bad.
All good.
It's all good learning. Yeah, absolutely.
I would add to what you're saying is having a degree is not necessary to work on a startup. Like, you have an MBA, you have a PhD, like, I don't know, he works with me, I have no idea if he has an MBA or a PhD, doesn't matter, I know.
Because their experience is sort of like the MBA and the PhD of
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, giving them the credibility, just bridge the gap and
Absolutely.
see it as you, it's not a negative, it's a positive for everyone to see you are an expert and that we're seeking out your help.
100%.
And to give you a level that we can rely on.
Yeah,
That's all.
and I think like, you know, if you need it for the future, it might be good to get that accredited, but like, it doesn't really matter. What matters how you learn and what you're learning.
Can I add that in America for Facebook, Google, you will find that you need an MBA to compete. But growth stage startup, no need. I don't have an MBA. I'm doing all right.
That's really true. Yeah, I think that for the kind of startup, I wouldn't even call Facebook and Google a startup anymore. They are like massive corporate behemoths. And yes, I think an MBA, and especially in the US, which is much more MBA based, can be quite useful there for sure. Yeah.
Just considering the audience, do I have to give up my job to do the fellowship?
You do not have to give up your. Do you have to give up your job? Is the question to do the fellowship. It is a full-time 6-month engagement. But some people are looking at it as they will take a secondment for 6 months or a sabbatical and keep their job. And you know, if they like it, they'll stay and work in a startup. If they don't, they'll go back to their job. I don't think you're ever going to go back. Like I think if you want to jump, you're going to make the jump. But that is the way that some people are thinking about it. Yeah.
I guess I ask is like, can I do it part-time so if I can still get some money whilst I'm working a little bit?
No, so yeah, you can't do it part-time, but we are looking at ways to, if folks have financial need, the ways to kind of support them. We want it to be need blind, so we don't just want people who are rich enough to take 6 months off to be the only ones who can do this. So we're looking at ways to support people who have financial needs to make sure that they can also participate in the program. But that is also one of the reasons we made it 6 months long and with no out-of-pocket expenses, is because we want to make it as accessible as possible, as opposed to kind of more traditional options.
Yeah, on that expenses, how much is it going to cost?
Zero to you. Yeah, so it's zero.
I wasn't a planned question either, by the way.
Yes, thank you for the Dorothy Dixon question over there. Yeah. No, it is a $0 zero out-of-pocket expenses. We have priced this at $50,000 worth of value. We think it is equivalent to an Australian MBA in value, but we ask for nothing out of pocket from the fellows themselves.
Two full questions. Is it for specific roles? So say I'm techie and I want to start doing something in small business, so the other way around.
Yeah.
Does it work like that?
Good question.
More for like one or the other?
Yeah, so the question is kind of like, what roles is it for? And where we're starting is at the intersection of product and growth. You know, what we want, so Australia currently has a massive problem with product management and people who understand growth marketing, which is very different to how marketing is kind of done in the ASX 200. Now, yes, there are also people, there's also shortages in technical talent, there's also shortages all over the place, design, UX, but this is where we're starting because we think it's the best place for the most of you who are in this room who are kind of like technically adjacent. You've probably got some analytical abilities. You know, you've worked in consulting firms, you're accountants, you've got some ability to kind of model and think logically, but perhaps aren't deep on kind of development tools. So we want to give you a kind of, that's our best guess as to where the power lanes are, but the idea is we'll give you lots of experience in working with product and growth teams, and then we'll help you find your power lane within that.
So if you currently are from the other end and you want to learn
Great.
scale.
Yeah, in fact, some of the best product managers in the world have been technical and then jumped across to kind of this technically adjacent role. So yes, if you're technical, fantastic. Don't have to be technical, but if you are, great. Oh, sorry, yes?
So there's a guaranteed job at the end of it, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Is it going to be like a salary negotiation process or like?
Yeah, so when I said there's a guaranteed job at the end, it will all be idiosyncratic to you. So we don't have kind of jobs cookie cutters that we're kind of going to force you into, but by exposing you to all of the different opportunities that there are, and by you spending kind of 3 months with 2 incredible teams, we're super confident that we can help you find, you know, your fit. And that's our commitment to you, is to kind of help you find that fit. You may decide not to take it, and that's okay. But we will make sure that we get you something, you know, an option. Yeah.
How many people are you taking?
So next year, we're going to take at least 8, but we're hoping to scale that up. So we literally have just started. This is the first time I'm publicly speaking about this. And so we have those 4 companies involved. We're hoping to grow that and also grow, if we go well within these guys' companies, we're hoping to grow the number of fellows who they'll want to work with. And so we hope to scale that up over the course of next year. But there will be at least 8 people. So it's going to be pretty competitive. I'm not going to lie. You know, we've already got, I think, how many
There's 200 applications.
200
impressions of interest as of like 24 hours after going live.
Yeah, so we just kind of hit the AFR yesterday and hit the 4th most read article on that site. So it's obviously something that people are interested in, but we, you know, so it will be competitive, yes, but I think that just makes it all the better reason to apply, because the people who you'll be even part of the application process with will be great, and I think it'll be a very good exposure for the journey that you're on. Even if you don't end up making it, I think it'll give you a good sense of what the startups are looking for and why.
And I'll add that if you don't make it to the program, I'm always looking for growth marketers and data analysts anyway, so
exactly.
you can just
so
approach
true.
your jobs directly as well.
That is so true. I mean, that is actually the way better point, which is that yes, we'll take 8, but these guys are going to take more. So it's a good way to get exposure to the companies that you may want to work for. Yes.
Is the application open to everyone or just Australian citizens?
It's open to everyone, but you just need to be able to work in Australia. So as long as you are legally allowed to work in Australia, we'd love to have you. Yes.
I know you said you have a blind kind of application process, but do you recommend maybe like a 2 or 3 years, as these, like they've said, before you apply? Like,
yes, I do. I think everything that the panel said, I completely agree with, which is that I think that learning to work and learning some skills in a corporate is, with the whole reason that we built this program is because we believe that the skills that you all have are very valuable in startups. So having 2 or 3 years or more under your belt is fantastic. And in fact, what we're targeting is that MBA level person. So someone who might think, I'm going to go do an MBA, we want them to come do this instead. If you really want to do work in startups, this is what you need to be doing. Okay, well, this has been fantastic. I'm going to hand it over back to Tip in a sec, but I just want to say that this is kind of like a bit of a life dream of mine, because I've been sitting where you guys are for some years and trying to work out my way to get into startups, and ended up thinking I had to go to Silicon Valley and go to a Stanford MBA, and then somehow pivot my way in. Ended up going to the US, getting really lucky and joining a rocket ship and just having a ball with it, but realized looking back how crazy and idiosyncratic and lucky that whole situation was. And so this whole idea is to take some of the luck and the risk out of it, so that we can just get the best people in Australia, the best minds coming to work for the companies that these guys represent. So looking forward to having you guys as part of this. So please, startmate.com.au, jump on board, start an applied application, and we look forward to seeing it. So thanks very much.
Awesome. Thanks, James.